Off the puck, and Glenn Cross headmans to the captain, Jerome Iginla, with Bowmeister on the right. Iginla in front, and score! It went off a skate! Jerome Iginla's bomb! The milestone moment! 500 goals!
Blocked, Iginla's loose, he's got a breakaway! Jerome Iginla scores, there it is! Point number 1,000! For Jerome Iginla. And the Flame.
Goal scorer with 10. Letelier out on the ice looking now along the St. Louis, the big line for Tampa Bay. Iginla back there battling. Letelier will take the roll. Letelier and Iginla. Yikes. I don't believe it. Letelier and Iginla. Iginla kind of slows for the backboard. Iginla picks it up. And leaves it. Here's Wilson coming out again. In the high spot. Third shot at the blue line. No shot in there. Carter on the net to the here's the pass. Iginla. Shoot. Stop. 3-on-4. Calgary wins the game.
Power play goal for Krejci on a deflection. And here are the three stars. Iginla! And a nice gesture here on the veteran. Boston Bruins coming up to make sure he takes a victory lap. Wow. The Bruins now coming back out of the room to enjoy the moment. I think the captain had a lot to do with this, and in a chart. They don't want to run off the ice. Well, Julian's message to the Bruins this morning is, you'll let me beat. You'll play all the night.
Flames fans, put your seats up. 7 all years. Yo, and you can find me in the home, chillin' with Jerome. Got my eye on the cup, baby, we gon' bring it home. Please claim it on my chest so you know that it's on. What I tell you about the West, kid, the cup is coming home. And you can find me in the dome, chillin' with Jerome. Got my eye on the cup, baby, we gon' bring.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Hockey Podcast, episode number 7. It is I, Kevin Olenek, on a very special day, and I'd like to take you back to December 20th, 1995, 9:50 p.m. Calgary time. At that time in 1995, there was a bit of a controversy as a stalwart legend of the Flames, Joe Nieuwendyk, was demanding to be traded, and it was at the time that legends were leaving the Flames. Al MacInnis, Doug Gilmour in one of the worst trades in Flames history, etc., etc. And it was just Nieuwendyk's turn. And it was a long, arduous first half of the season of where Nieuwendyk was going to go. But finally, December 20th, 1995, 9:50 Calgary time, he was traded to the Dallas Stars for Corey Millen and a guy named Jarome Iginla. Who, said Flames fans? They had no idea who this guy was. He was the 11th overall pick of the Dallas Stars. He was a Kamloops Blazer star, a 2-time Memorial Cup champion. By the way, one of the most sportsmanlike player during that time as well. But fans didn't know who he was until the World Junior Tournament. And that was why Al Coates at the time said they needed to make that trade. We'll get into that a little bit more as we talk here. But he became a face to people notice in the World Junior Championship that year, winning the gold medal. 23 years later, it's hard not to mention the Calgary Flames without the name Jerome Iginla. Iginla, a 2-time Rocket Richard winner, Art Ross winner, Lester B.Pearson winner, King Clancy winner, NHL Foundation winner, Mark Messier Leadership Award winner, Rex Green Leadership Award winner, 2-time Olympic gold medal winner, and 1 game away from winning the Stanley Cup, officially announced his retirement today at the Chrysler Club at the Scotiabank Saddledome in Calgary that caught the attention of all of Calgary. And today we reflect on his legacy, his personal impact, and we pay tribute to the man that was Jarome Iginla. And joining me for this one, for the second time on the Hockey Podcast, is Connor Turner. And of course, none of us are living in Calgary while this is going on, so this is awesome, right? Hello?
Yep.
Oh,
hey, Kevin, how's it going? Sorry, cut out there a bit.
Oh, okay. It's funny, neither of us are living in Calgary during this time. You're in Burnaby, I'm in Kamloops.
It's pretty fitting that you're in Kamloops, actually, I guess, with the topic in hand.
That's true, actually. That's very true. It is true. Yeah, that's a good point. Where he's part owner here in the Kamloops Blazers, and I'm pretty certain that they're going to do some sort of tribute to him as well at some point in time. But we'll get to that. What were your thoughts on, I guess, last week when Iginla announced his retirement, and kind of what were your thoughts on what were you thinking about today?
It wasn't really a shock. I think it was pretty inevitable, especially after last year and not getting signed this year and stuff like that. So it wasn't much of a shock, but I think like many Flames fans, it's been easy to take some time and reminisce of what he means to you personally, the city of Calgary, the Flames organization. So it's bittersweet. I'm happy that he's retiring as a Flame and that he did a classy presentation today, an interview. And it feels right that he retires officially as a Flame and through the Flames organization, and that the announcement came through that rather than just maybe a statement or from his agent or even just an Instagram post. So I think it was really well done today. So I think it's a bittersweet moment. I don't think anyone should be surprised, but it was nice to see him retire within the Flames organization, or at least announcement.
Yeah. They did it right today, I thought. And this isn't been exactly, I'm not trying to throw water on something here, but the Flames haven't exactly been known for their incredible treatment of their alumni in comparison to some other team. And today they did it. It was really well done, bringing back Peter Marr, a legendary Flames broadcaster who I think it was all but 10 minutes he said that he's called Iginla's accomplishments in Calgary. Fun fact, I mean, most people don't know this, but he was the radio play-by-play voice of the 2010 Olympic gold medal goal in Vancouver, so he even called that as well. I know I didn't put that clip in there, but there's so many moments. But looking back, it's so funny. It's kind of funny how this all kind of ties together in a weird way. Not only that I'm living in Kamloops during this time, but it really was one of those. Back in 1995, the Flames were not. They were on the down end. They won the Cup in '89. They missed the playoffs one of those years. They didn't win a playoff series since then. At that point in time, the franchise was, to say that the franchise was struggling was polite. This was kind of the start of the Young Guns era with Valerie Bure and Todd Simpson and
Cale Hulse. Jonas Hoagland.
Who else was on that?
Nat Kelly. Some great names.
Yes. There were some classic Flame names there. Pierre Pagé was the coach. The organization didn't realize the spark that it was getting at the time, because it was just one of those things is that they had to move Nieuwendyk. And Corey Millen was a very serviceable player. This was also the time it was about one season later that Theo Fleury was traded. It was pretty close to the end of the Fleury era in Calgary too. And it was kind of an interesting passing of the torch moment that year when in the playoffs, Iginla and Fleury played on the same line against the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah. And it was a weird period too, because just even thinking back now as we discuss it. I remember I was a pretty hardcore Flames fan growing up, but that was about the period in junior high when I kind of faded a little bit as the team started running out of air from the championship in '89. Obviously, all the players started leaving, as you alluded to, and I think the city was kind of losing faith a little bit in the team.
Yeah,
and even though they were still making the playoffs, it was the beginning of what would be the young gun era, and it really started with Iginla coming into town.
Yes, and he quickly became the face of the franchise. At the time, he was slowly but surely. There was a bunch of other guys that were there, but they didn't really capture the hearts and the minds. But Iginla and Val Bure were kind of the two that were sort of becoming the rising faces of the Flames, and it turned out to be Iginla was the one. And a lot of the Valerie Bure was not that Valerie Bure wasn't talented. A lot of it was because his name was Bure, and they were hoping that he was the same as the guy that played in Vancouver, Pavel, and he just wasn't, and that's okay. Iginla didn't get off to the greatest start, and he kind of mentioned this today as well. He didn't have a lot of confidence going in. He came into this league as a finesse player, and it's interesting how we talk about him now and some of the memories, but he didn't come in to this league as a fighter.
No, he really didn't. Well, I recall correctly, it was him and Dave Gagne and Jonas Höglund that were kind of like the second line for the Flames in his first year.
Yes.
And he did well. I think he got, I think 40 or 50 points in that first rookie, came in second in rookie voting that year. But yeah, that was definitely a very young version of Iginla, not the one that's, quite famous and is, the prime of his career when he was a Flame player. But yeah, he definitely was a different player when he started out, but, it grew and his leadership grew as the years went on.
And, he also, so 1995 comes along and the Flames make the playoffs and they get swept by the Chicago Blackhawks. And for a few years, these were some of the head coaches in Calgary Flames history. Don Hay, which was kind of made sense but didn't work out. Guy Chiron, Al Coates did it for a while. Pierre Pagé, Greg Gilbert, and the Flames didn't make the playoffs for 7 consecutive years. And I'm not being hyperbole when I say this, Connor. I don't know if you agree with me on this, but a lot of people, this wasn't mentioned a lot, but there's been a debate about the arena in the last couple of years and what we should do with the Saddle Dome. We were really close to losing this team.
Oh, without question. Yeah, the dark years, I think, as a lot of people talk about them, who kind of stuck around the team and kept cheering for the team. I remember my friends and I were in university, and we were scrounging to get game packs during one of the game pack drives just before, I think, Pengrowth Oil Service, I can't remember their full name, came in and gave sponsorship and bought a bunch of tickets to, quote unquote, save the team from moving type thing. But those were dark years. We used to go as buddies in high school and university down to Desperados before games, and they would have events where they were literally giving away tickets. And I think there was a string of about 4 games in a row where we basically went there before games to have a couple of beers and got tickets to the next game that we went to, and so on and so on. So those were the dark years, and it was a rough pull, a rough sell to get any Flames fans in the stadium.
Yeah, it was, and it was like, for those that are watching our Canucks fans now and are like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like frustrating. There was no real talk of, there was kind of a conversation about rebuilding, but at that time there was not a lot of hope with this team. Up north, there was a really exciting team with the Oilers that were, they found a way to beat the Dallas Stars one year. They found a way to beat the Colorado Avalanche one year. It wasn't the Oilers that we knew. They were kind of this young up-and-coming team consistently at this point, but they actually were winning playoff series, which was causing more frustration. And the Flames were terrible at drafting, which was one thing at this time. Of course, the famous pick of Rico Fata as an example, Chuck Kobasu. We can go through some of the names that were missed at the time. Sergei Samsonov was a miss. There was a number of misses at that time.
Yeah,
it was bad. And the other thing, that was really also very rough, is they had the ugliest uniform in professional sports with the dragon head that I hope we
and I disagree with you on that one. I think that the podium one from that era, the very beginning, was worse than the dragon head.
The podium, the kind of the stripy.
Yeah, the straight
that's
the
true.
chest podium that had the flame floating on it. That was by far the worst. But the snot-faced horse head is probably an easy second worst Flames jersey of all time, without question.
Yeah, and it was just, it was really rough. Then a lot of people got angry, and this got even more frustration. Craig Button came in to be the GM at around this time. He took over for Al Coates. He drafted, I was at this draft in Calgary where they drafted a guy by the name of Brett Cron. But he also later on made a trade in about 2001. Corey Stillman, the leading scorer for the Calgary Flames at the time, was traded to the St. Louis for a checking center by the name of Craig Conroy. Do you remember your reaction to that trade at the time?
I do. We were sitting in, it was just before, it was kind of about the time, like a few years before TSN and all the hockey networks caught on to the whole draft day excitement.
Yeah.
And my buddies and I were sitting around in Max's Cafe at UFC, that's how old this is, and watching this and kind of shocked that, we were waiting to see who we'd get for Corey Stillman. There was rumors flying around and shocked out of our minds who this Craig Conroy guy was. I think one of my buddies used to play with him one of the EA Sports NHL series that year, and that was the only reference we had of this guy, and we were choked that this was the return on Corey Stillman at the time. But hindsight is always 20/20 now, and that was one of the most pivotal trades in the Flames franchise, I would say.
Yes, and at the time, even Iginla said it sort of today. Conroy admitted it. They weren't really sure about this trade, but they found a way to create some chemistry, basically telling Conroy, just go dump that puck and go get it and get it to me and score. And, it was kind of a unfortunate thing for Mark Savard, who never truly recovered from that injury, but he was playing with Iginla at the time, but it was Conroy and Iginla. And during the 2001-2002 season, the only thing that was really watchable about the Flames at that time was Iginla's run for 50 goals and the scoring title. And I don't think this is one where I think this 50 goals is going to be a little bit more significant, because this was during the period, especially from 2000 to 2004, where goals were impossible to come by. Like it was just after the era that 50 goals was fairly commonplace, and it was happening a lot. During that time, 50 goals was pretty much the equivalent of a Brett Hull 70-goal season in terms of how tough it was to score in the NHL at that time.
Yeah, it was the era of the trap in full swing and the dead puck era and stuff like that. So it is quite an accomplishment, and I think that will probably go down as one of the, or maybe I think it was the season afterwards, but still the Hart Trophy that Iginla lost to
Jose
Theodore.
Yeah.
Easily one of the biggest mistakes in NHL history for the Hart Trophy.
Yeah, I know he didn't make the playoffs and I know that was part of it, but it's just, I was definitely on the Iginla train there, but it was such a tight race, and that went on to that. We keep going here because then it's 2003, and the Flames still haven't made the playoffs. We were going through the SOS, and then another significant moment happened, and it was actually, ironically enough, it was in December, and They fired Greg Gilbert after, good God, how too many seasons of.
Yeah, I think a year and a half of that train wreck and that gong show.
Yeah. And then they bring in Daryl Sutter to coach this team. I remember at the time that that announcement was probably, as a Flames fan, it was probably the most excited I've been in a long time. It reverbed through that dressing room. And that second half of the season, although they were 10,000 points out of the playoffs, we saw a little bit of a rejuvenation of the way the Calgary Flames played. And he brought in the identity that Iginla was talking about in the press conference, but some of the things that the Flames were known for, and that's that gritty, tough, really hard to play team.
Yeah, without question. I think that was one of the most pivotal moments in Iginla's career. And then you also have to look at the next season once he kind of took the reins as GM and some of the trades that he was able to pull off to, pull in the Chris Simons, the Ville Niemanns,
Marcus
Sean
Nielsen.
Donovan. I'm not sure if it was that year, but obviously the Mika Kiprusoff trade, critical for the franchise. But yeah, he really changed that whole team. And I remember when he was first hired is, one of the biggest things that kind of shocked people was his rough and gruff attitude, but just the way in that he forced the players and taught them how to not want to lose. I remember that being so vivid in such a different atmosphere around the Flames because they just accepted losing. But he taught them not to, just accept the idea of losing, not to talk and joke with the opponents and that kind of thing. And it was that attitude that really, I think, him and Iginla were really the face of the franchise for the next few years after that.
Yes. And because we won't take losing more than 2 in a row at this point in time. It's time to get serious here. And as frustrating as the last half of the Daryl Sutter general manager era came, because he kept bringing in, retreading Alex Tanguay and Olli Jokinen, he made some really shrewd trades. He found a way to get something for Chris Drury, which a lot of people were not sure was going to happen. And, he got Rhett Warrener, which was a key component.
Stefan Yell came in earlier, but he, elevated his game as well. Same with Robin Regehr.
Yeah.
There was just some amazing trades that first kind of trade deadline year, period when he took over the reins as GM, where he got, they got Jamie McClellan, as I said, Chris Simon, Marcus Nielsen, those kind of players, Ville Niemann, they were all heart and soul players for that Stanley Cup run.
Well, the Theron Fleury trade was Wade Belak, Rene Corbet, a second-round pick which turned out to be Jared Stoll, and future considerations, which turned out to be Robin Regehr. But yeah, you're right. It was Sutter that acquired Stefan Yell. He acquired just a bunch of gritty guys. Marcus Nielsen, Stefan Yell, Rhett Warrener, just some really nasty people. Ville Niemann, who... We'll get into this 2014. You could argue he was a benefit, but you could almost argue he was a detriment at times as well. Bunch of just really gritty, two-way, he understood where that game was going. And, the first half of the Sutter era as a GM was a masterpiece. And he arguably... I know that we're all on the Iginla trade, but you could legitimately make the argument that he actually made the most important and most significant trade in Calgary Flames history in November of 2003 when he acquired Mika Kiprusoff for a 5th-round draft pick.
Yeah, hands down. I think it's one of those incredibly debatable things, whether the Iginla trade, the Lenny McDonald trade, the original Doug Gilmour that brought him to Calgary trade, it's easily in the top 5 trades of the team and franchise. But, if you're looking at the team itself, it's hard to see a 2003 to 2004 Stanley Cup run without Kiprusoff playing on the top of his head, that sort of thing. So I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah. And again was another part of that turnaround. It was, there was a month that it was Roman Turek and Jamie McLennan, but basically Mika Kiprusoff took over. And at the time, they were actually, I forgot about this, but they were in last place in the Western Conference when they made the move to get Kiprusoff.
Yeah. It was an incredible run.
Yeah. Then, they have I was at the game where they beat the Phoenix Coyotes 1-0 and advanced the playoffs. And it just, I remember it was, as soon as that horn went off, Connor, the city just turned into, Flames fever started that moment. It was like everyone was fighting for playoff tickets. All of the radio stations were just behind it.
It was a magical moment. That was a magical moment and a magical run. I don't think people realize how amazing that period of time was for the city of Calgary, for the Flames organization, for the careers of Iginla, the spirit of the city, everything. That was just an amazing moment. And like you too, as I said, my friends and I, we've been diehard Flames fans for most of our life, but those 7-8 years of the really rough, dark period of the Young Guns, to come out of that and finally see the playoffs after 7 years of not making it was just phenomenal. Yeah.
And it could have ended quickly. Everyone would not have been necessarily surprised. And, that was also the year that Todd Bertuzzi had that long suspension because of his hit to Stephen Moore, and Dan Kluche got hurt. But the Flames took the Canucks to 7 games. And this was how incredibly immersed this city was into the Flames at this point in time. There was a Monday Night Raw card that night, a Game 7 of that Flames-Canucks game. There wasn't a single wrestler or a single moment of that. Back now, I don't watch wrestling as much, but there's a lot of talk now of how wrestling fans hijack crowds. Go find that 2004 Monday Night Raw in Calgary. The entire 2 hours of Monday Night Raw was Go Flames Go. It was insane how incredible that was that night. And then the Flames get the lead in Game 7, and 2-1. They're going down the ice. I forgot that a fan threw the jersey on the ice.
Oh, that's one of the most memorable moments of that
I totally
series.
I totally forgot about that. Iginla misses. The Canucks go down and score. I remember Jovanovski jumping up and down like a baby in the penalty box. and then it's just I'm like, okay, well, that's that for that, because, we've been through enough disappointments. I guess we got to 7 games. Way to go. And lo and behold, Iginla, Martin Jan-Jelena gets the goal, but Jerome Iginla does pretty much everything but score. Jelena deposits that in, and that was insane, crazy. Yeah. And people forget Game 6, there was quite a comeback that the Flames had to make that a game, because the Canucks were way ahead. The Flames came back. That was one of the crazier games. And
even the first game of that series, the Flames got blown out.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I remember that because my friends and I all met together to watch, and we were really excited about it. And then it was just a complete blowout, and we were all just like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's probably it for the series." But at least it was good. At least we made the playoffs, right? Yeah. So that whole series was fascinating. And one of the things I will always remember that is I was living by a small small junior high and elementary at the time, and the morning after that series, I remember walking out on my way back up to university or off to work and just hearing the kids in the playground talk about, screaming "Oh, I want to be Iginla, I want to be Iginla, I want to be Iginla." And it was that moment that I realized how much this whole run and this whole, that series win actually meant to this city, where you had a full generation of kids who'd probably never really cared about the Flames, all of a sudden wanting to idolize the Flames and wanting to idolize Iginla. Yeah. And the city bought back into the Flames after that series win against the Canucks. It was just an amazing time.
Yeah, and I'm not being hyperbole again when I say this, but I really truly believe that series, that entire run, probably saved the franchise.
Yeah, I would without a doubt agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and it was like the overtime call-in show with Robin Kerr was going on for like hours. They went into Detroit. No one expected anything. They one of the greatest games I have ever seen in the Saddle Dome. It has to be was Game 6 of that Flames Red Wings game. Double overtime. Martin Jelena scores again, and it was 1-0. Kiprusoff is standing on his head. The place is going. That city went nuts again. They go to play San Jose, thinking, well, that's nice. We get to the Western Conference Final, something to build on. They win there, get to the finals. Lo and behold, they face the Tampa Bay Lightning. I played the clip about there's the fight with LeCavier.
Yeah.
Game 5, there's the shift before the shift.
Mm-hmm.
This famous Sedin shift. This was the shift before the shift. Although it wasn't as long, to be fair to everyone, it wasn't as long, but it was one of those incredible moments. Saprikin scored the biggest goal of his life. We're 1 game away. Game 6, Lanny McDonald was in the crowd. They had him front and center. The camera was on him as much it was as Eddie Lack's dad and Michael Furlan's mom later. And the puck, it's in. It doesn't count.
It was always in. Just, I think one of us has to say that straight up.
It was in. 100% it was in. There's no question about it. But they could never recover. And I wonder what if the Flames won that cup, Iginla, the benefit of that is, I remember after that Game 7, I was just wiped. I was drained.
Yeah, it was a painful loss.
Yeah.
It was just, and the Game 7 was the worst too. I think Game 6 was harder to take, but Game 7, there's just Tampa. If I recall correctly, Tampa really dominated Game 7. The Flames were never really into it. It was close, but not.
Yeah,
you never really felt. It felt like that Game 6 was the one chance to win the cup.
Yeah,
and Game 7 they just couldn't pull it together. The war of attrition finally caught up to them because that team was bloodied and banged up by the time they got to the finals.
Yeah,
yeah. So, I think the biggest travesty of the whole thing is not only losing the cup that year. Although the city will never, the city embraced them as champions just for that run because it was so magical. It was almost storybook run. I don't think, I know, so Oilers fans or Canucks fans are going to hate me on this, but I haven't seen a storybook run like that up until this Las Vegas night series. But I think one of the biggest travesties is that the lockout was the next year.
Yes.
That just salt into the wounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And they never... And it was significant because I think this is probably going to anger a lot of non-Flame fans when I say this, but the Flames kind of made the NHL change the rule book because then we started to see it was a lot of other things too. I think it was the fact that it was the dead puck era, and I think hockey was getting boring and all of that. I'll grant that it had a significant amount to do with what we're talking about, but at the same time, the way that the Flames are playing the game, it caused teams to change, and you saw changes with how the Flames were being approached in 2006. It just wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So, but there was that started a 5-year run of the Flames making the playoffs, unfortunately never getting past the first round. One of the most heartbreaking moments, and I think even Oiler fans might agree, because was Christian Huselius on the breakaway in Anaheim, Game 6, makes the move, hits the post, and they never recovered from that. And
that team, the Iginla era Flames, really never recovered from that Ducks series.
Yeah,
I remember vividly, just before it started, saying that it's really cautious about the Ducks. They were a good team. People were taking them too easy, especially after the run 2 years earlier. But Iginla and the Flames just never could get over that first round hump after that Duck series.
Yeah. And you know what? They've never been able to get over that Ducks hump since. And I would suggest that moment was the turning point of that rivalry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we had the 5 years of playoffs in a row. Then it's the Jay Bouwmeester acquisition. We had Jay Bouwmeester, Dion Phaneuf, and Robin Regeer. This was also the year we had Mike Keenan come in, and I don't think Keenan was that bad. I'll have to say it. I don't think Keenan was as bad as a coach as people made him out to be. I think it was okay. Yeah, he was harsh. He was hard. He was Keenan-esque. But I don't think it was that terrible. We had a pretty strong team. Just didn't work out. But I don't think Keenan was that terrible of a coach. And Iginla would agree with me.
Yeah, I don't think Keenan was the problem. I think it's kind of the craziness of hockey as a sport in general, and the NHL, and even the Stanley Cup playoffs and the format that it is. It's just, almost bad luck. Teams just not catching that fire, that luck that they had in that magical run, and also just, not being able to be over that hump mentally. When you go from being the finals 1 year, you have a full year off, you lose a year of Iginla's prime, the whole team chemistry. Season starts up 2 years later, and then you're trying to get back into, win that next round and replicate what you did 2 years earlier. But, teams are taking you in a different stance. They know who Iginla is. They know that the team that's behind them and that sort of thing. I think it was just a period where the Flames just, for whatever reason, could not get over that hump.
Yeah. And that was one of the series that they played was the rising Chicago Blackhawks team with Taves and Kane. And we saw Taves transform into this prospect superstar to a superstar. Same with Kane at that time. The Flames were a good team. They just weren't a great team at that time. But also, this was also the time that we were running into the time that we ended up trading Jerome again. Now, I have brought this up several times on a number of different conversations on Canuck podcasts. And I have irritated a couple of Canucks fans saying this. But I think one of the biggest mistakes in Canuck franchise history was they never approached the conversation of actually trading the Sedins. And when I moved out here, I was like, why is there no conversation about trading the Sedins? Because I knew at that time, because at the time, it was a few years before, we were like, you have to trade Iginla. It wasn't because the Flames fans didn't want Iginla to be on the team. It was because A, there was some value in trading him, and B, they knew they wanted Iginla to get the cup.
Yeah.
And it was such a different mindset when it came to this. And there is a certain parallel, I guess, between the Iginla and the Sedins. There's some really similar stories in terms of how they approached the game.
I think without question, like even how they approached the game, but also their career trajectories, right? Yeah. Like, the Flames towards the end of Iginla's tenure as a Flame were really struggling. As you mentioned before, one of the Sutter's biggest weaknesses was his draft picks choices. And they were never able to fill out the pipeline of prospects to give Iginla the talent that he needed to outside of trades. And unfortunately, all the trades didn't work. And that's the same thing the Canucks ran into when the Sedins, after they made their run to the finals, is they were never able to get that talent to match up and to give that second wind with the Sedins. And the same thing happened to Iginla.
Yeah. And it wasn't because let's be clear, that trade was not a good trade. It helped because we had 3 first-round picks that year. One of them was Sean Monahan. Another one was Emile Poirier, who might make it, and Morgan Klimchuk, I believe.
Yeah, it was Poirier, Klimchuk, and then afterwards we've managed to grab Shinkarik and I think Lidstrom. No, wait, Lindholm.
Lindholm.
We're trying to get every single draft pick from that draft pick.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And Hannafin was the year after, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was and was Ben Hanowski, who's no longer in the league, and another guy who
I can't remember his name.
It wasn't the greatest trade ever, but it was one of those that had to be done, and no one begrudged Iginla leaving. It was handled with a lot of class. He comes back. I played the clip. He comes back into a standing ovation with Boston. He does the run with Pittsburgh, gets to the Eastern Conference Final. Does the run with Boston, gets to the Eastern Conference Final, not to the Cup. He ends up in Colorado. Final game in LA. He does end up fighting Mark Giordano, which I feel like is another passing of the torch.
Yeah.
What
is that? There's a famous. I think there was a famous quote when Iginla got traded, and someone was asking who the next captain was, and I think Iginla passed. What I think they had is they had a roll of HB pencils with rubber bands tied to them.
Yeah,
I don't know if you heard this one, and the idea that everyone together is stronger, and Iginla passed that on to Giordano. It was the last thing he did when he walked out of the dressing room to kind of give him the captaincy of the team. I don't know if you heard that one. It came up somewhere. It's one of the stories. It's a pretty interesting story. And then, fascinating enough, of course, he became the captain later on.
Yeah. And that, and of course, we have to go through the Olympics of 2010. He doesn't score. He assists on probably one of the most greatest goals in Canadian Olympic history. 2 goals in 2002 for the gold medal. And we mentioned his awards. I don't know what else. He's pretty much, if he won the Cup in 2004, I think that we would be having Iginla on a much higher pedestal than we would. I think hockey would, but I think he is an all-timer in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been thinking, the one thing I've been thinking about is whether and someone brought it up online, and I've been kind of just thinking about it a bit, is who is the greatest Flame of all time? And I have to say it has to be Jerome Iginla. I know there's a case to be made about Theoren Fleury and what he did for the franchise, especially in that series of dark years. And obviously Lanny McDonald was the face of the 09-08 Stanley Cup team.
Yeah.
89.
89.
Sorry. Wow, that's embarrassing. But I think without a question, Iginla is the all-time greatest Flame.
Yeah, and I think people love, I don't mind Theoren Fleury. I know that sometimes he gets off on things online, and I think that ultimately hurts his reputation. I've heard Theoren Fleury share his story, and I think he shares it really well. He does say some, and but ultimately, I think the way that Iginla presents himself in comparison to Fleury, and I'm not attacking Fleury in any way, shape, or form. Theo is who he is.
Mm-hmm. Without question.
But Iginla just presents himself in a much different way that I think it's hard not to look at Iginla as the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, and when I say and when I look at Iginla's legacy, I look at him, and we kind of touched upon it. Those were dark days for this franchise, and very close to disappearing from Calgary. It's not as much as the stadium issue is a question right now. The Flames have, since that run, have become a perennial money-making team in this league. They are one of the cornerstone franchises. They're not, on the verge of moving. There's debate with that, but I think there's a generation of Flames fan where he is the reason why they became a Flames fan. And I think that speaks for a lot of the people that are into the Flames and invested in the Flames right now, whether they're in university, into that 30-40 range, that sort of thing. Iginla is that reason why they are a Flames fan.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why you have to put him up there. The one thing I will say, though, is in this that I do think, and I'm not wet blanketing this when I say this. I brought this up earlier. I just don't think the Flames have done a great job with their alumni. And if there's an example of it, it's the way that Mika Kiprusoff has been sort of silently not been treated. Like, this guy was a Hall of Famer in a few years ago. I forgot that he was actually in the Hall of Fame. Because I was about to blurt on Twitter, why the hell is Kiprusoff not in the Hall of Fame? But it turns out he is. But I don't feel... But the Flames haven't boasted about that. The Flames haven't rode the Mika Kiprusoff. And he was, like, as much as Iginla was loved, Kiprusoff was loved as well. Like,
oh, yeah. Huge. He was just as loved as Kiprusoff. Now, the one thing I would argue about that and just counterpoint is that I think Kiprusoff is very, he was always a closed, reclusive player and didn't really enjoy the spotlight as much as he got it. So that would be the one question I would say, like, how much of this is Kiprusoff not wanting to be involved in that way? But I do agree with you on the alumni side. I think a lot of Flames fans hate the Forever of Flames concept.
yes. It's a terrible idea. It's
a horrible idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I don't know what that means. I don't I think if you ask a Flame fan whatever that means, it's like I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's a weird concept because it's not a jersey retirement, but it is a jersey retirement. And they do the whole hoopla of it, but like, it's this weird halfway thing. It's either retire the jersey or not retire the jersey. And then, like, it's just a weird concept. And I think that's where a lot of the criticism of the Flames organization in regards to how they treat alumni comes from, is that kind of vibe and what this Flames retire. Like, because I guess the question is like, do the Flames actually retire number 12 or do they give it a Forever Flame? I think if they do a Forever Flame, fans they'll riot, they'll lose their mind. Like, the only way they will satisfy fans is by retiring Iginla's jersey.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. I think you have to retire the number 12. We must acknowledge that there was another player that played very well for the Flames that wore number 12, and that was Håkan Loob. He won a cup and retired in '89, but he was a really talented player. No, he wasn't Iginla, but the number 12 has been synonymous with some pretty quality players.
It has been. Håkan Loob is one of my all-time favorite Flames, so I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yes, because he was
the original great number 12.
Yes, he was. Loob. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the first thing that I think they need to do. As I do think they need to retire the jersey. I think that's a no-brainer. I wonder what else they can do, and I'm going to throw an idea out that is a bit crazy. This has never been done in the city of Calgary before. But what about Jerome Iginla way?
I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked if that happened. And you're right. I do not think that has been done in the city. Like, up north and the Queenie too, up to Edmonton, there's a bunch of streets named after Oilers alumni. So I would not be shocked to see his name on a street sign.
Yeah. Maybe
in front of the new stadium that will be built.
Yeah. I would have no problem with it. And you know what I like about the name Jerome Iginla way is because he had a way. He has a way about him that I think we were reminded about the standard that he set, right? And I don't think that I think that's almost more symbolic than this Forever a Flame. It's like, the Patriots way. There's the Patriot way, and I feel like it's the Jerome Iginla way. I think is more symbolic, and get rid of this Forever a Flame thing. Come up with a Flame Hall of Fame or a banner, a wall, or something for the love of God. But
something like that. No, I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So maybe let's go through our top 3 Iginla moments. What are your 3? Just probably catch up on
off the top of my head, I think obviously the Canada, the gold medal game in 2002, that pass one of my favorite moments of all time. I know it's not a Flames one, but that has to be, it has to rack up there because it meant so much to the whole country and really introduced Jerome to the country itself. The second one would have to be after Game 7 in that 2003-04 run, when he was interviewed and how he conducted himself during that heartbreaking loss, and like the pain in his eyes and the disappointment. I think that'll always leave an impact on me. I think it was one of those few raw moments in sports that they show, and that's always one of those memorable moments. And then I would say like the second one would be, the third one would be his very first set of goals against the Chicago Blackhawks during that playoff run. It was a dull season, and I just remember watching that playoff run specifically to see how the Flames would do because they had no chance against the Blackhawks, and just seeing him conduct himself and how much excitement that brought. I remember that as a kid very vividly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the best moment was Iggy. That also teased us because one of the things that was the two debates about Iginla that over the years in Calgary Flames lore was fight or not to fight, and he just was going to fight. But the other debate of lore, with all due respect to Craig Conroy, was we need a centerman for Jerome Iginla. And that was why I think people were just salivating at the time that maybe if Iginla ends up playing with Crosby in Pittsburgh, that would be his opportunity to get his cup, because we remembered it in 2010. And yeah, it didn't happen, unfortunately, but we saw what this guy could do with a premier superstar center. Not that Craig Conroy was not a great centerman. He just wasn't Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, he wasn't that level. And it just shows that like how difficult it is to actually get a premier level center in the NHL.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I lose you?
No, still here. Sorry.
Some other moments that his 50th goal in 2002 was something. The shift, a lot of the off ice stuff and just how he handled himself, I think was just, you mentioned that, I think was composed. But it's weird because I think just the way one of my favorite moments, and I just was going through it and I was just like, this was where it got my heartstrings a little bit, is when he comes back as a Boston Bruin. That night, it's unusual for fans to actually cheer against the Flames, but they actually were wanting Iginla to score. They were more interested in Iginla scoring than the Flames winning.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a weird time, too, because it wasn't even, the team he was initially traded to was the team he signed the next season tour with, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just a fascinating one. And it's hard not to, fault anyone for wanting to see Iginla score. And that last, I think you put a plate in the clip there where, the Bruins wouldn't let him go back onto the bench. They kept pushing him out, and Zdeno Chara pushed him out, to do his couple laps and stuff like that. Like, that was just amazing. Yeah. That was just a sight to behold.
Yeah. And, yeah, I mean, the 50th goal, when he got everyone to shake the hands of Trevor Linden. I mean, that was incredible, too. He was just, I think, an overall class act. There's so many, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that weren't as much played. The Lecavalier fight was actually more for Lecavalier than it was for Iginla at the time. But there's just so many moments.
Oh yeah, there's tons of moments, and I think some of his best moments were even off the ice.
Yeah.
If you've been on Twitter at all today, looking at the thank you Iggy hashtags, I even just saw that the Prime Minister of Canada made a comment about Iginla's service and what he meant to this country and stuff like that. So but you see these small little stories about what Iginla did for people off the ice and never really took any credit for it and never made a big deal. It was the days before social media, so these stories didn't explode like the Ovechkin one in Edmonton last year and that sort of thing. And I think those are the little things that people always forget. Like, we'll always remember about Iginla as in addition to his off-ice, triumphs and stuff like that, his on-ice triumphs.
Yeah, it was, and I think that's what I think what that Bruin game suggested. It was about his off-ice stuff. It was not just. There have been some really talented people that have played in Calgary. Let's not dispute that. Christian Huselius was incredibly talented, but he didn't resonate with the Flame community. Kent Nielsen was probably the most talented. I think the most talented player to ever lace up a Flames jersey was Kent Nielsen.
Yeah, probably without a doubt.
Yeah, but he never resonated the same.
Yeah.
Gary Roberts too was loved, but Jerome Iginla was it was different with Jerome. It felt like, and I think that this is one of the things that the Flames have been missing a little bit over the years. With all due respect to what they've had, they just miss that guy, that almost that face. I mean, Giordano's a great leader and a well-recognized world leader. He's won awards for him. He's not Iginla, and it's just they're missing that spark. I think they have that guy, the potential of that guy, if he can keep himself straight. And that guy is Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah, I can see that too. I can see Monahan too. Yeah. The problem with Monahan is obviously the boring Monahan moniker. Yeah. I don't think he captures this. He'll never be able to capture the city the same way again. Maybe Tkachuk will.
I think Tkachuk should be the next captain.
Really interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I think Tkachuk is the next captain.
Oh, that's interesting.
I do. I think there's potential for this guy to go one way or the other. I will grant that, but this guy does want to win, and this guy will drag his team by the ass to win. I'll grant him that, and that's why I see that captain. Johnny Gaudreau, I know that people I had this conversation with other people that are outside the Flames, and they laugh at me because I'm like, a couple of years ago, the MVP of the Flames was Michael Backlund. They're like, are you freaking kidding me? Gaudreau is miles better than Backlund. But as a Flames fan, I don't know if Johnny Gaudreau is as revered as people outside of Calgary think he is.
I think he's fairly revered, especially with this young generation of this newest generation of Flames fans who have kind of bought into the team. The kids growing up now and that sort of thing. I just don't know if he really wants that level of spotlight, and or can embrace it the same way Iginla did. I think because Iginla was such a dominating presence.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what you allude to with Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk is, and when he grows, he even fills out a bit more because when he's only 20 years old, he's going to have that dominating presence and that Mark Messier stature. And I don't think he's going to be Mark Messier per se, but it's just the way that he plays the game is very similar to Iginla and what those visions of a true leader does on the ice. I think Gaudreau is a phenomenal talent. I just don't see him, and he is competitive as all hell. You watch him on the ice, he cares about losing.
Yeah.
He does not want to lose, more so than I think anyone else on that team. But I don't think he has that stature to become a physical leader and a community leader in the same way.
Yeah,
and that is not a slight on any of them. They're all, from what I've seen and what you hear around the rink, they're all wonderful guys.
It's more that they're introverts. This is not to bring Dougie Hamilton into this conversation, but I think, all this talking about mental health, and I'm not saying that Dougie Hamilton was just a different person that doesn't make him necessarily a locker room problem. He was just a different person.
Oh, without question. Yeah.
Like, I don't, he didn't answer media questions. Okay, I don't think that that's great. But, some of the stories I heard, it's just, and, Gaudreau, the same thing. Yeah, I think he's probably just more of an introspective person, and he just doesn't want to be that big superstar guy. And I think also, in a Canadian market, it's a lot harder to be a superstar and a face of a franchise in a Canadian market than it would be in an American market. 100%.
Oh, 1,000 times. You just have to look around the league and look at the superstars. Look how much Crosby has thrived in Pittsburgh. I can't imagine Crosby thriving nearly as well in Montreal. Ovechkin has probably had the most criticism as a superstar. He's become a leader in Washington, without question, the face of that franchise. But then when you look at Connor McDavid up in Edmonton, he just does not look like he wants to be the superstar franchise player. And he'll probably eventually turn into that. Like, he is the franchise superstar, but to be that leader, he doesn't seem like he wants that spotlight or the scrutiny that comes with being the leader of a Canadian team.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen already some controversies with his Instagram and his girlfriend already that has been frustrated. I mean, it's going to be interesting in Vancouver to see how Brock Besser takes to that as well, because
he's an interesting kid. To be fair, I rarely pay attention to Canucks games or anything, but the few I've seen and what he's done in the community, he just looks like a kid that's having fun and enjoying it. So it'll be interesting to see how he transfers. I see that kid as the face of the Canucks franchise.
100%. He's him for sure. But it's just going to be so interesting to see how he handles that. I mean, even in Toronto, I don't think, it's been a tough transition for an Austin Matthews. It's going to be a tough transition for John Tavares at the start to adapt to that expectation. Max Pacioretty has stumbled in Montreal. Erik Karlsson.
In Ottawa there.
Yeah.
Well, even just look at PK Subban. I think that's the poster boy for the troubles of being the face of a franchise, and what makes almost, now that I think about it, now we talk about it, Iginla's achievement even more impressive is just like, look at PK Subban. He was the face of the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously got traded for whatever. We'll probably never know the full details about it. Yeah. Fitting in with the locker room, whatever. But look at him in Nashville now, right? He's just become a star of the league down there.
Yeah.
And Canadians have yet to recover from that trade.
Yeah. And even Winnipeg, I mean, they don't have, Patrick Laine. They've done it interesting because I think everyone was expecting Patrick Laine to be this big superstar, but they built this team around a team, and I don't see a superstar in Winnipeg, and it's, they're almost the model Canadian franchise right now.
Oh, without question. I would fully agree with that. Winnipeg is the model way for Canadian franchise to kind of be put together. And I think they're doing a good job of sheltering Patrick Laine in that regard. He gets enough time, but he when you see interviews with him, he's not really the most mature kid. He's still a little goofy. But I don't think he's ready to take on the full weight of a franchise, like how Iginla had to do and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much, much different. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward with the next wave of superstars. And it's also different because back when Iginla, we'll wrap it up here pretty quickly, but back when Iginla and some of these other stars, even the Sedins were branching out, and Iginla
and Marcus
Naslund, all these other superstars, Saku Koivu, Doug Gilmour when he was blossoming in Toronto, he was a star in Calgary, but he really became a superstar and a better player in Toronto. All of those guys, Daniel Alfredson, it was different because there was a space where they could get away. And now with the social media generation and with the Athletic and the NHL now really be more year-round in terms of attention, it's tougher to be a superstar now.
Oh, without question. And I think you see it even if you look at Iginla's career. Like, you know, he was getting sponsorships until he had that 50-goal plateau, right? Like, he was allowed to grow, mature, and make mistakes. And, you know, you look at Connor McDavid, and before he was even drafted, he was doing Gatorade sponsorships and Coke sponsorships, and people were lining up to get his signature on things.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost impossible now for these young kids to, you know, grow up, and like half of them are getting media training at 17 years old just to deal with this amount of pressure. So it is a totally different time period, and there's more innocence, you know, and the social media aspect wasn't an everyday factor of it.
Yeah. And that'll be it. It'll be I mean, we're seeing it in sports now where even yesterday a kid gets a one-hitter and his Twitter relieved 6 years ago that he had a bunch of racist, homophobic remarks, and it's so different now. I mean, even here in Kamloops, Logan Stankoven, remember that name? He's being paraded and considered a superstar. The kid's not 18.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's you know, like I know the Flames actually do social media training with each draft pick after they draft them, which I think is such a smart thing to do. But it's one of the key things that they do during the prospects camp that they have after the draft happens. And, you know, it's just one of those things that franchises have to deal with and players have to deal with from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah. We're living in a different world now where every single step is being analyzed. And I mean, what's Brock Besser doing in Minnesota? Why is Quinn Hughes going back to Michigan? Things like it's like is Evan Bouchard going to be on the Oilers this year? What should we do with Evan? Like, it's just this elongated debate, and it's like they're 18.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
let them grow.
Yeah, let them grow. But who knows? Well, we'll leave it there. This was our tribute to Jerome Iginla. Thanks, Connor, for joining. You can follow you where at C2 Overdrive, right?
Yeah, C2 Overdrive on Twitter. And Kevin, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you again. It was fun.
No problem. We'll just end this off with a little bit more of Chilling with Jerome.
Home, he's flaming on my chest, so you know that it's on. When they tell you about the West, kid, the cup is coming home. Hey, yo, somebody tell me where the Red Sea at? Where them die-hard Flame fan heads be at?